Welcome to Season 4 of She Ventures. I am your host, Doria Lavanino. She Ventures is a podcast about women who are pivoting in their lives and careers. We live in a world where women of color founders raise 0.5% of all venture capital in 2020, and women overall a paltry 2.2%. This podcast is about elevating women's voices. Our new website, sheventurespodcast.com, provides resources, actionable tips, mentorship, and community. We do not subscribe to the idea that there is a dearth of fundable ideas from women. There is no pipeline problem. There may be a visibility problem, and that is what we are here to fix together. Let's talk about the reality of women, money, entrepreneurship, and work-life balance on this season of She Ventures. This guest is one of the 2.2% of women who successfully raised venture capital. In June, she closed a seed round of $4.5 million. Equally noteworthy, she raised capital to scale a wellness platform called Kindra for women going through menopause, an often overlooked market. Catherine Balsam-Schwaber, welcome to She Ventures.
Thank you so much.
It is great to have someone on. It's so close to my heart, the period of life that I'm currently in, menopause. So the fact that you are leading the effort for a product for women like myself is exciting.
Yeah, it is. It's a really exciting chapter in my life, I have to admit.
And before you were CEO of Kindra, you had a 20 plus or minus year career as a veteran of marketing in a really diverse group of well-known brands, some of them Mattel, NBC Universal, MTV, for those of us who remember AOL,
Yes.
Time Warner, all of that. What skills do you think that you acquired as a marketer that are now helpful for you running a startup?
That is a great question. You know, my entire career has really been fueled by a passion to understand how people make choices. And even in my early days, I worked in politics. And when I started that work, I mean, right out of college, I thought that I wanted to be in policy, right? I thought I wanted to define policy and help to make change in society through that. But what I realized quickly was that it was the power of finding ways to effectively communicate policy or product or, fast forward into marketing, but that it was so important to understand the motivations of people and often women, because many of the businesses and the products that I have been drawn to are very focused on women. And that I really have this deep passion for understanding what people need and what motivates them, and then trying to match that up with solutions to be created to serve that customer. So I think that is throughout, my time working those 20 years, kind of the greatest thing that I learned in many, many different formats that I have applied here, where I really am so passionate about serving people on their menopause journey, but from the point of view of trying to understand how to help in so many ways, right? That it is physical and emotional and, affects your whole person. And so how do we think as a business and as a leader about serving a woman's whole journey at this phase of life, right? So all of that kind of culminated in this role where I'm so fortunate to be able to think about it all day long.
What you said is so true, and I think not lost upon many entrepreneurs if they haven't learned this lesson already, which is you can have an idea, but if you haven't validated it with what the pain points or the needs of your market actually is, it's probably going to be very difficult to get it off the ground. And the fact that you bring that sensibility, it's like in your DNA, I think is probably very helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and it also makes it, I think, in some ways easier when you can align your personal passion, like intellectual passion, also to the work that you're doing, because it just opens up a lot of possibility.
100%. That's why I do She Ventures. So I've never asked someone to give their elevator pitch before, but I just thought I would take the opportunity. Can you give us an elevator pitch for our listeners of Kindra?
Yeah. So Kindra is a health and wellness business for women on their menopause journey. We offer estrogen-free essentials to support your changing body, essentially. And above and beyond the products that we offer, we're very focused on supporting women finding information and education about all of the aspects of menopause, as well as supporting you with a community of women who are going through something similar. And ultimately, making sure that you get solutions that work, that might be our solutions or might be other solutions that we don't necessarily offer, but that we really want to be guiding you through this journey and really acting as your partner.
And community, I think, is something often overlooked and so important. Is there a significance to the name?
Yeah. So inspired by the idea of kindred spirits is how we think about it, because community is the heart of everything. We recently started this program called Couch Conversations, and it's born out of the idea that, since the early days of sewing circles, women have been coming together in groups to have conversations that ultimately lead to significant change in culture and laws and regulations, and that the support that we can find in each other through our own words and our own experiences can't really be replicated in other ways, right? And so community takes on a lot of different forms, but it's really about listening to other women's stories and then being brave enough to share your own.
I love that. Menopausal health starts, for listeners who don't know, when a woman stops menstruating for 12 consecutive months. That's how it's defined. However,
Yes.
as we all know, we're all individuals. We go through varying degrees before we're considered actually menopausal. And one of the things that I found very interesting was that the Female Founders Fund, one of your investors, did a study and found that this is a $600 billion spending opportunity, which it's amazing to me that such a large addressable market has been historically so overlooked. Why would you say that is?
Well, menopause is the double whammy of ageism and sexism. I mean, in my mind, it's pretty simple, because there's such a negative connotation to aging, especially for women, and that a lot of what's happening in your changing body around menopause is related to fertility and sexuality. And so it gets wrapped up in a lot of things that we don't want to talk about. And that also there is this underlying notion that for the individual, for the woman, that I'm supposed to accept this and this is the new normal. And that the lack of innovation and investment to support women's health over 45 generally is seen very clearly in menopause, when there was for decades really only one solution, which was hormone therapy which has come a long, long way in and of itself, but that was sort of seen as the only solution for some of the challenges that you might face in your changing body. And now we're really turning to the investment community, right? It's really the venture community in so many ways that has invested in these new products and businesses to find pathways for women to get solutions that really are working for them, whether they are hormone solutions or non-hormone solutions. And, we offer, the reason that we focused on estrogen-free and hormone-free was because we wanted them to be as accessible as possible, right? Everybody can use them. You can use them if you are taking hormones or not, but that we really are trying to build a suite of products that are available, effective, scientifically born. And a decade ago, I don't know that you would have been able to get investment to be able to do that kind of development. And we're very fortunate to be in this moment where we can really be experimenting and partnering with lots of different types of development organizations to be able to bring those products to market.
It is a very exciting time. And you're so right that it has been ignored. And one of the things that you said earlier about ageism is something that I notice in media, even with very nuanced things, like when I asked someone to create a logo for my podcast, none of them were women that were over 30 in their image. And I said, you've got to have someone with gray hair. Like, we have to represent all women because I'm 51 and I haven't, ceased to exist because of that. In fact, I think I'm probably better than I've ever been. So that was the first thing I wanted to say. And then secondly, regarding HRT, hormone replacement therapy, I know that a lot of women, it probably is a good solution for some. I tried it and it made me batshit crazy.
Yeah.
It was awful for me. And so I think that the idea of having a non-hormonal solution is a really interesting one.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you are right. There are some women who respond like any medical treatment, right? There are some people who respond incredibly well, and there are some who don't. And there are some who find themselves somewhere in between. As I said, that we have a lot of our community members who are using some level of hormone or hormone cream and alternate with our products because it just helps to keep them more in balance. But ultimately, a lot of this actually comes back to education and information, which is how do you even figure out how to make the choices when so many doctors are not educated to inform you? And maybe that's the first place that you would start, but maybe it's not. And then generally you're going to Dr. Google to diagnose what's happening to you. And I think your point about the definition of menopause, we have women coming into our community in their late 30s who are talking about seeing the changes in their bodies because it's really, this is really a hormone journey ultimately. And as women, we have been on a hormone journey almost our entire lives. And that we know how to manage our body often as it relates to hormones. And that this is a shift that is sometimes more dramatic for some versus others, but it's a progressive shift in your body. So the earlier, that you begin to understand, I think that this is what's happening and it's part of your journey as a woman, I think the easier it is to begin to find solutions and think about, changes that you might need to make to keep yourself feeling amazing. And I think that that's part of, right, the problem with the stigma and the silence around menopause is that we don't even really understand that it's something that could be beginning to happen earlier than we think, because we think of menopause as a thing that happens to a much, much older woman. And we kind of have to align our chronological clock, right, to our vision of what we think menopause is, if we even think about it at all.
It's so true. And it goes back to the definition that I gave earlier, which may not even be accurate if we start to look at it more and more.
Yeah.
And one of the things I noticed when I went onto your platform is you have a quiz that women can take. And to your point, because it's so individual, what people experience, I think it does a really good job of helping a user figure out where she might be in her journey. What I wondered about it is by now, I'm sure you've had a lot of people take the quiz, and I'm sure that you look at the data anonymously. Are there certain things that stand out to you that you didn't expect?
Well, I mean, not that I didn't expect, but there are some resounding concerns for women, around the physical changes in your body, right? And in your weight. I mean, we can't get away from that even as we age. So that is often a very prominent thing that women are concerned about and being able to manage. One that does come up a lot is sadness, that women often feel sad during this time, which I think goes back to education, information, community, and choices, because I think that some of the sadness comes from feeling that sense of isolation, and that, if you are in a world where no one has ever talked to you about menopause and still nobody is talking about menopause, and your body is, often women talk about my body is betraying me, right?
Mm-hmm.
That not having go-to resources at your disposal, whether they are another person or a place online, I think can exacerbate some of those feelings, that can be hard to manage. And that's, why we think so much about the whole person, because it isn't just physical, it's
Right.
also an emotional journey. And one of the things from my own experience, but from a lot of the women I have spoken to who do genuinely feel like they're in the best time of their lives right now, you have to do the work for yourself, which is a hard thing to do, right? You have to find those solutions. And even in a world where 10 years from now, when menopause science is incredibly well funded, right? You'll still have choices, and you'll have to work through for your body what really works best for you.
I think when you talk about sadness, I was thinking about myself and also about something that you touched on earlier about ageism. Women, are often defined, I think it's slowly changing, by your ability to, your fertility. And I do remember that when I stopped menstruating, yes, it was like, I was like, oh, thank God I'm done with all of that. But I also felt a tremendous sense of loss
Yeah.
because part of my identity was wrapped up in the fact that I'm a mother and I chose to be so. But that's not necessarily true for everyone. But yeah, there are so many things that can go into that sadness if that's what someone feels.
Yeah. And I think that's actually, when I think about many of the conversations that I've participated in with groups of women, that the acknowledgement that women are feeling sadness, and someone else says exactly like this moment, right? So do I felt that too.
Yes.
I think makes it feel a little less like I'm sad and I'm the only one feeling this sadness. I think that it's natural, because it also is, I like to think of it as a midlife awakening, but there is this very physical reminder that we are getting older, and you can't get around it.
Right.
So it's like, that's why you have to do the work. You have to do the work and say, okay, well, this is happening, and I'm going to, like I did every month, I'm going to tackle it head on and really figure out what works best for me for right now. And by the way, that's going to be changing too. Even when you think about the overall menopausal journey, women are living longer, working longer, having children later. The entire idea of what menopause even is in our current society, I think, is so different than the generations that came before us, and certainly the generations that are going to come after us. I don't know that they will have this kind of stigma. Certainly will disappear, I'm pretty sure, but also that it will just feel like a normal just another thing that you talk about as a woman of, getting tips from your friends and managing like pregnancy was, or like having your period when you were 15 and going to the beach and trying to figure out, what to do about it.
Yes. Yes. I have two daughters, and I've been reliving some of those experiences recently. But so true. Community is really key. And I did see a lot of that on your platform, as well as some really, as a content creator myself, solid educational information. And I think that's important to underline, because to your point, people do go to Dr. Google. We all do. And there are some really, really poorly written and researched or just fallacious things online. And so to know that you're getting quality information is really important.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of our major tenets. I mean, we work with many healthcare providers on the content that we create, and really pride ourselves on making sure that we have the facts correct. We have an incredible woman who's the head of product development, who has a deep science background herself, and she's really led the charge on a lot of our educational content, which has been amazing.
Fantastic. Getting back to you, I was kind of piecing together just by not Dr. Google. This is now private eye Google. No, I don't want it to sound creepy in that way, but just whatever information that I find when I research. So the company was initially, I guess, in an incubator as a part of Procter & Gamble Ventures, right? And then you were brought in to be the CEO. Is that right?
Yeah, it was actually the initial really marriage was between M13, which is a fund in Los Angeles, a well-known fund, and Procter & Gamble Ventures, with the idea of commercializing a small line of products that the team at P&G had developed. And so, in the world of new models, I think it was really exciting that I kind of happened into the middle of this union, if you will, to become the third leg of the stool and really build the brand and the business around products that we knew were safe and effective and had a ton of consumer and product testing prior to even making them available, which I think sort of speaks to that, right? How do we think about investing more and in different ways in categories like this for underserved consumers? And I really think that was important, especially as we got started, because it gave me a tremendous amount of confidence that I knew that once people had a chance to try the products, that they would work, and that we could be offering solutions like from the moment that we opened our doors.
Yes. And from also a name, I mean, Procter & Gamble is as kind of safe as it comes in terms of products. So was it hard though, because you came from more of a big company culture, kind of red tape, at least from my own experience, that's how big companies have been, to lead a scrappy startup?
It was such a confluence of circumstance. I had been in this magnificent big company game for quite some time, and I was ready to pivot myself. It was, also it was right before the pandemic.
Yes, I noticed that.
And I was turning 50, and I just felt like I wanted to really focus on something that was back to my roots. So, when I worked in politics, I worked on healthcare reform was my passion, and that I was looking for a way to focus on access to health care and wellness for women just generally. And that coming into this just felt like it was calling me, that it was so important and so right in the moment that I was in for myself and for the business, that I think that that's part of the entrepreneurial journey, right? It just is something that feels inside like it must be done. And I felt that, I still feel that, but I felt that at the time that it was like destiny.
And so with that in mind, that it's a very mission driven for yourself, and I would think for others in the company, how would you describe the work culture at Kindra?
Well, we really love each other. It's a little, and I think when they listen to this, they will be laughing, but it's a little creepy how much we love each other. So we are 9 people strong right now. For a long time, we were 5. And I think that the satisfaction of delivering on the mission, we are all very mission driven people, but the satisfaction of delivering on the mission is inherent to who we are. I also think that, we started in an all virtual world, and I've never built a team like that. Also, I was the woman who was in the office all the time, and I traveled all over the world, and I was away from my kids, and I had a lot of support. And when all of this started, there was no nanny,
Right.
nobody helping with the laundry. I mean, there still isn't, right? It's a startup. So, but I had, my kids at home. So when we very, very, very first started, it was me in the living room with my kids on either side, with each of us on our own folding table. Right? Like
Yeah.
thinking this was only going to be a 2-week gig, like 2 weeks of us at home like this, and then everything would go back to normal. Right. And so I think that everybody in the company was facing that challenge, just in different ways, of not only trying to figure out what's happening around us, but also building our business. And so I think that gave us this sense of closeness because we were together all the time and we were the only people that we saw. Right?
Yeah. I never thought of it that way. And it's interesting because the media is so focused on kind of the negative, right? Which is remote working. How do you manage your employees? It's so difficult. But I've never heard someone say, and it's so beautiful and refreshing, that you're in a mission-driven company with women who, some of whom are, in the same situation as you in terms of being a mother, certainly dealing with household stuff and trying to build a business. Like, that's a lot on anyone.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And so I think that was part of having our mission. And I don't want to speak for them, but in retrospect, I think that having our mission probably helped us also stay focused on something that wasn't the craziness of the world, right? It gave us a real focus on trying to help the women that we could. And, we did a lot of work also to try and help customers who were impacted financially by COVID, and making sure that we were supporting women who really needed us in the moment, and taking extra time with people on customer service calls because sometimes they would just call and want to talk. And so, I think we felt deep in it with the women who were part of our community, and it just made our sense of mission even more powerful.
And your community during a pandemic, it's so hard to know how things will shake out in terms of growth. How did it grow?
A lot.
A lot.
A lot.
Okay.
I mean, we've been growing a lot. We've been growing very, very fast, and in a lot of different ways. And I think that, it's interesting. Of course, like many direct-to-consumer businesses, we were concerned as the world was returning to quote unquote normal about, what would happen. And we haven't really, nothing has changed so much, except that we find women gathering together more, which is fantastic. So when, we're thinking more about how we can support women in real life as opposed to just online. And that's the shift that we're making. But ultimately we haven't seen a difference in our business. Some of the questions and concerns that we get are different. So, our number one selling product is a vaginal lotion for vaginal dryness.
Yeah,
And
I saw that.
yeah,
That looks good.
yes, it's excellent. And so, but one of the things we hear more about is women dating again as it relates to vaginal dryness, right? And so, and especially older women, which we love, right? All of us having sex is amazing. So, but I think that that's a new thing that we, during the pandemic, obviously wasn't happening as much. It's like women.
Of course, right. Because people couldn't go out to date at
Exactly.
all.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's new and kind of fun.
That is exciting. And there's kind of the other side of the question, which is that I had asked initially about coming in as a CEO. And that is that very often founders, and I'm not saying that's true in this situation, but they're usually the visionaries, the ones who start the ball rolling, so to speak, but oftentimes don't have the skills or the interest, it could, or both, to take the company to the next level. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, it's in my situation, I think it's a little different because we were so nascent. It was the beginning in a lot of ways. And that I often think of it as like children, whether I give birth to my baby or I adopt my baby, I love her the same, right? And that being the CEO is a balance of imagining where we go into the future and managing the now. That I was fortunate that I had the skill set to be able to apply that, but that I really felt, from the beginning that I am Kindra and Kindra is me. and that I think it's a great question. Because of that, sometimes I need people to help me get more perspective, right, on the business.
That's interesting. Yes.
Yeah. But I think, to your point, I'm acutely aware of it because I, have had a lot of experience dropping into organizations and companies that were in the moment where, right, I was dropping in next to the founder, basically, and how difficult that can be because, as a company grows, it changes so much.
It does change. Yeah. And the needs change.
Totally change. Yeah.
And it makes sense. And I think listeners who may not know that this is such a common practice can think back to even like Facebook and Google. Like the founders were very young and they did come up with a great idea, but when it came to actually running the business, they just didn't have the experience, and so someone more experienced was brought in.
Yeah. So I think that the birth of companies in general is complicated, and that being a CEO and a founder or not a founder it's really about trying to build the best team to create the greatest chance of success for the business.
Yes.
And that whether you are a founder leader or a founder participant, right? Because very often founders also change roles over time in a business, right?
They could be an advisor, right?
Exactly. That it's having enough self-awareness to say, this is the best role that I can play to support the future of the company, which I think translates also into board members or investors, right? Over time, as the companies grow and change, I think that there's so many factors. I mean, that's something I'm thinking about as we are growing so fast is that, even in a small team, at the beginning, we were all doing everything. And we have to grow beyond that and think about, how we bring in people who specialize in different aspects of the business, right? And so that's even that part of it is similar, right? Because if you were the founding copywriter, then right, and someone else comes in, it's hard to adjust. So I think that that's actually one of the part of the magic and the pain of starting from zero is being able to navigate all of that and feel like you still want to participate, whatever role you're playing in the company. I think it's a challenge.
Yeah, and I would imagine as a CEO, I was thinking about what you just said about the copywriter who might have a real sense of pride of ownership of the work that she did. And her skills might be different and or better used, in another role. And so as CEO, that must be, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is it challenging to navigate those kinds of situations?
As a manager, I wouldn't even call it a CEO. As a manager, those situations have always existed. I mean, back to your original question of the skills that I can apply here are no different than, the challenges I would confront in a growing department inside of a company. That sometimes you discover that the person's magic power isn't actually in the job that they're in, but it can be in another part of the team. And I think that, my approach to all of that is as long as it feels like an opportunity to grow into the career path you are imagining for yourself, that it usually ends up in a great place. Or even if it isn't exactly what you imagined, that it's something you feel like you can embrace. Because I think that actually, just in terms of career development, is so important to be able to say the thing that I like and the thing that I'm good at is where I should go, as opposed to the imagined thing that I thought I was going to be.
Right. Or that my parents thought I was going to be, or whatever the case might be.
That's exactly right. And so I think that, that's the opportunity to lean into, is to help people recognize that even if they were writing all the copy forever, what they really are great at is like making the ads or whatever it would be, that, I think is part of it.
Absolutely. And going back to the platform, and I had mentioned the quiz, and women can go on your website, which we'll mention at the end of the show, to take the quiz, which I really recommend anyone do who's listening. Walk listeners through the customer journey after the quiz. What can she do?
Yeah. So one of the things about the quiz that we felt was really important is that we lead with education. So we try to deliver educational resources. When we have a pretty deep blog that can be a kind of fun educational rabbit hole. And we also have community resources that are either our Facebook community or connecting actually with other stories of women. I think one of the things about community, in my experience, is it doesn't have to mean that you are jumping into an actual quote unquote community, right? Like a Facebook group, that we try to reflect the stories of women in the blog as well. And women comment about the stories. And so I think there are other ways to feel like you are supported in this experience, which is really important. And then the third piece is solutions that work. So, for us, we are, from a product standpoint, really focused on what I would consider the four most disruptive aspects of menopause for the majority of women, which are sleep disruption, because if you don't sleep, everything sucks. Let's call it brain fog and fatigue. So being able to find more focus is another thing that we hear women talk about all the time. Hot flashes and vaginal dryness. And, vaginal dryness is something that is experienced by between 80 and 90% of women. And many women never seek treatment for it because they think it's like the new normal. So vaginal dryness is a really important aspect of education and information and solutions and community for us, because we want women to know that there are products out there that can really support you on your journey. So, with that, we have continuing education for every member of the community through our email. And we try to focus on those areas that are of top concern for you, whether or not they're related to the products that we sell at the moment. And we are creating more and more community tools for women to participate with us. And then also expanding our kind of service offerings as well, to make sure that we are really addressing some of those top concerns that are not solved by product alone.
I love that. And, I did not realize that there were 34 different
Yeah.
symptoms in menopause and maybe even more that,
More,
who
yeah.
knows? I wanted to ask, what is the most popular part of your platform? Is it the e-commerce part, the community part, the education part, the Facebook part? Is there one that really is like leading the others, or are they all about the same in terms of interest?
I mean, it's hard to put them against each other. Our educational content has been really exploding, if you will, just in terms of even organic engagement. So women finding us more and more on their own. And on the product side, I mean, similarly, because our business is growing and we essentially use, the proceeds of the product to help fuel the other aspects of our business. So that is important for how we think about our growth overall. But I think it's interesting to think about how all of those components are really married together. And even in our new product development, we have been laser focused on listening to our community about the things that are their most immediate gaps and trying to expand our product offering, but tied to the things that our community is asking for. So it's hard to say what comes first. I mean, probably the number one thing for us in terms of women telling us how much they love it is the quiz, and then the products, because you're getting physical relief for hot flashes or vaginal dryness, or you feel like you can find your keys every morning, right, with the focus.
Right.
So
yeah,
right,
huge.
so, right, huge. So when you begin to feel that physical difference in your body, that is a definite win.
Absolutely. And you wrote on the site, and it's something that really struck me. Self-care doesn't just happen. We need to make it happen. And you were saying this in reference to the many roles that women play in their lives. So my question is, for women, and it's something I struggle with, honestly, I don't have the answer, who work long hours. They may have kids, they may not, they may be with a partner, they may be caring for aging parents. They may not have the resources, right, to outsource any of this. How is she going to find her time?
Yeah. I totally agree with you because I am that woman right
Yeah,
now.
me
And
too.
right. um, the unfortunate reality is you have choices. So what I do is I open up my day earlier, right? That is the choice that I made. And I mean, interestingly, so we recently moved from Los Angeles to the East Coast. And in that process, I lost the power cord to my Peloton. And I hadn't ridden it for probably 3 months because everything has been so chaotic. And I was feeling not great. I didn't feel like I could wake up at 5:30 in the morning. I just had too much going on. I work late. My clock has been changing a little bit too in my own menopausal journey, right? I used to be able to wake up very early. Now I do wake up early, but it's like at 4:30 in the morning. It's a little different, right? So I changed my own way of managing, which is if I wake up with disrupted sleep, often I get up and I work. And then after I bring the kids to school, I work out when I first come home, right? I ordered a Peloton cord on Amazon and I work out when I first come home and then I start working. And it's actually one of the things that I've talked about a lot with the team, which is you have to make the time to do the things that you care about.
Yes.
Even if it feels uncomfortable. And I will never judge you for saying the best time for me to do my stuff is between 11 and 1. And you should do it and just block it out on the calendar. And that will make you a better member of this team, a better member of your life. And you have to block it out. And I have found that to be true for myself, because if I just allow everything to flow all the time, I get lost in the flow.
Yes, I think it's such a great point and something I can't underscore enough, and something that also happened to me recently. And I loved hearing how you described how you resolved that so eloquently. It is a matter of being intentional, and it is a matter of making choices of I might spend 30 minutes less doing one thing, but I'm going to take that time for myself. And it does make a difference because if you don't replenish your fuel tank, it does empty.
Yes, that is right. And I think that that's actually part of the like in the hormonal evolution. I think, a lot of women experience more fatigue, which is kind of, what I think about when I used to be able to get out of bed and go work out at 5 o'clock in the morning. I can't my body hurts. So I can't, right? I can't do it. That's my big menopausal symptom is achy. I get really achy. And I take the core supplement, which actually eliminates it basically. But I still, when I wake up in the morning, I'm more creaky than I used to be. And I just can't jump on a bike or go out for a run. So I need more time to like warm up my system. So, I had to find a way to change that. It's not great because I'd rather come home and jump right on my computer and start meetings. That feels more convenient, right, for everybody if I'm available at 8:30. But I just sort of say like I have to do this otherwise it's not good for any of us. And I know that it's hard. Like one of the things I gave up, I used to love going to the supermarket, and I stopped going and I just started pickup. Like I ordered all online and then I drive over to the supermarket and I pick it up. So in my part of Connecticut, it is free for pickup. So it really just saves me that hour or multiple hours of going to the supermarket each week. And so I kind of always, in my head, that was the balance I made, was I would stop going to the supermarket and instead I would make this my own ritual time.
I love that. We're almost to the end of the podcast. I wanted to just briefly ask you, with more competitors cropping up, what is your competitive advantage? What do you think makes Kindra stand out?
I think it is our focus on science-backed information and products. I also think that our really authentic approach to connecting with our customer, and then going back to my own personal passion of really listening and understanding what people need for us to be able to solve their needs as much as we possibly can, will continue to set us apart from others. I often say that I don't actually think we have competitors exactly because we're so individualized, but I do think ultimately the idea that there are more businesses serving women in this later stage of life is amazing, and
Yes.
not just limited to the thing called menopause, but really thinking about all of the things that are happening to our body, because as estrogen depletes, right, you have a greater risk of osteoporosis, heart health, right, and also depression and anxiety and all of those things. So I think that the more we have collections of companies, and we partner with a lot of folks who are growing into this larger category of supporting women in this phase of life, I just think that is better for everybody. I mean, better for women, better for our business. And it's really, it's so exciting. It's just such a great time to be able to lean into this stuff and see how many lives we're actually having an impact on for the better.
Yes. I think it's so exciting. And I was going to ask you, where do you see Kindra in 3 years? But when I listen to you talk about, listening to your customer, it almost seems like a silly question, because while I understand that you might have a vision, it also depends on where your consumers lead you, right?
That's exactly right. It's like the career path conversation we're having. It's very much we want to go where we're needed, and that's our plan.
Do you think that the data that you're collecting could be useful, again, anonymous and sanitized,
Yes.
and all of that, for scientists, researchers? Do you think about that?
Well, it's certainly helpful in understanding what this menopause journey is. I mean, I think there is an opportunity to kind of redefine the language we use around all of this, that the boxes of perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause seems like an artificial construction, made by
Men.
a group of male doctors a long time ago, because it's really just a continuum, right? It's such a gradual process. And that's part of the reason I think it's so challenging, right? It isn't like, yes, we mark it as it's been 12 months since you've had a period, but honestly, many women start to get erratic periods during this time. So do you even know when it was 12 months ago?
Right.
A lot of women have no idea, right?
Yes.
They just stopped and then never got it again. So I think that that's part of what I can see even more clearly now, is that everyone's experience is different. Some women feel like it's starting in their 30s. Some women are getting hot flashes in their 70s. There are no boxes in this storyline. It's just your individual story that matters.
I love that. I love having heard your individual story. I love hearing about Kindra and how she is growing. I'm making her female.
Yes, I love it.
Where can our listeners learn more about Kindra?
Yeah, so please visit us at ourkindra.com, which is the website, and all of our social handles are also at ourkindra. We have the quiz there, which is a great place to start. As you mentioned, I mean, it's I think just very useful to take and learn a bit about what's happening in your own journey. And all of our products are there. And we have a lot of new programs coming this year and next year, some new actual physical products, and then some new resources for women as well.
Exciting. So I can't wait to see what comes next. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I really loved it.
You've been listening to She Ventures. Like what you heard? You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and sign up for our newsletter so you never miss a show.